Kentucky at Georgia. Mark Stoops' teams have played relatively well against Kirby Smart's teams over the last couple of years. 16-6 loss, a 30-13 loss, and a 14-3 loss the last 3 years. And very few teams have made Georgia play in a low-scoring rock fight the way Kentucky's teams have. I still do not know if you can out Georgia, if you can play their game, run Ray Davis, play good quality defense, and do the things that Georgia wants to do against Georgia. I still don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do that in Athens, especially. And a lot of this then comes down to Devin Leary, who has been one of the least efficient quarterbacks in the SEC. They've got a lot of weapons. I like Liam Cohen and what he's doing on offense. But if Kentucky is going to keep this game close, and we just got done talking about some of the questions about Georgia, but if Kentucky is going to keep this game close, I do not think they can do it without their starting quarterback, Devin Leary, being very good in this game. He is under 60% completion percentage. He is under 8 yards per attempt, one of the worst quarterback ratings in the SEC. He's turning the ball over more than most quarterbacks in the conference. He has got to play his best football game of his career in Athens for Kentucky to keep this close in what is probably an SEC East Division championship game.
On Devin Leary, he is 13th in the SEC in the conference-only games in yards per attempt and quarterback rating. I think, to your point, 9 of 20 last week, also just 5.6 yards per attempt this season. So I don't think Kentucky can win with those type of numbers on Saturday. Now, Georgia just gave up 200 rushing yards, over 200 rushing yards to Auburn. Is it realistic for Ray Davis to replicate what they did against Florida? Probably not. If they can, all of a sudden this conversation changes. But I think Georgia is going to focus strictly on trying to slow down Ray Davis, which then puts it back on Devin Leary. Leary's capable, I think. For some reason, whether it's been the offensive line. They do have some injuries at receiver that are worth keeping an eye on for Saturday night. But this passing game has not gelled as well as I thought it would be doing so for Kentucky at this point of the season. So I think Devin Leary's under the spotlight Saturday night. He's going to have to step up because I don't think Georgia's going to let Ray Davis run for 200 yards. And then on the flip side of things, Kentucky's defense, I think, is kind of underrated. This is a really solid group. Georgia's had some issues at the line of scrimmage, getting their running game going. So how do they defend Brock Bowers? Can they create some short fields for their offense too? So I think Kentucky can at least make this interesting. But a lot of this comes down to whether or not Devin Leary can deliver for them on the road.
It's sort of like Kentucky wants a replica of what Auburn did to Georgia last week, which is hit a few big run plays, create a few turnovers, get a couple of short fields, capitalize on those turnovers with a few trips to the red zone that end in 6s and not 3s. And then I think what's going to happen is Carson Beck and Brock Bowers will take over in the third and fourth quarter. And I think that's actually kind of similar to what we could see. I am assuming that Kirby Smart has had a hellacious week of run fit practice with his defense. And Auburn, let's be very clear, this is good news for Kentucky. To your point about the argument against Georgia, which is Auburn shows no threat whatsoever in the passing game, and they still ended up running for 200 yards. Why? What's going on with Georgia's defense? And can Liam Cohen see that film and take advantage of wherever those issues are in the Georgia defense? Now, keep an eye also on Javon Bullard. He missed a few open field tackles last week for Georgia. His first game back, I imagine he makes those tackles this week, so that could be a factor. I think he's probably more prepared, better, acclimated, got the cobwebs or the rust knocked off or whatever last week. So that's something to keep an eye on because he's kind of the heart and soul of the defense, and now he's back for Georgia. It's strange. Kentucky has turned these games and controlled the style of these games under Mark Stoops against Kirby Smart. And if they do it again, it could be a very interesting and close football game. But I still think it comes down to which guy makes the play on 3rd and long in the fourth quarter. And right now, Carson Beck has shown us that he can do it, and he's at home, and Devin Leary has not, and he's on the road. And I think that's as simple as it gets. I'm not gambling on this game. I wouldn't touch it. I had Georgia last week. I was dead wrong. I'm not messing with this game either. 14.5-point spread. The Mims injury to Georgia's offensive line could be a major concern because the size of Kentucky's defensive line is large.
They're massive. Yes,
they're large. They're very large, and I think it's going to be real ugly in the first half. I think it's very similar to the Auburn game. And if Georgia doesn't turn the ball over like they did against Auburn, give them short fields, make Kentucky go the length of the field, I think that's where they win the game. So we'll see.
I think Georgia does need to figure out to start faster. That's been a problem all season for some reason. Just first quarter, second quarter starts. They against South Carolina, against Auburn, they got into early deficits, had to come back in the second half. Against those teams, you can do it later in the season. It might catch up with you. It might catch up with them on Saturday if they start slow against Kentucky. But to me, this is, like you said, I think Carson Beck's road performance last week gives them the confidence to sort of maybe continue to open things up a little bit more offensively. And we just haven't seen it out of Kentucky's passing game. So I like Georgia at home here.
Yeah, I'll take Georgia at home too, which is we're not going out on a limb there. But if you're Liam Cohen, like, what are you doing with Brown and Davis in a non-traditional creative way? That's what I want to see. Use those guys in a creative way to get them the football, to sort of loosen up the Georgia defense a little bit, so then you can come back to what you want to do anyway, which is hand the ball to Ray Davis. So it's a really, I mean, Mark Stoops, from a quality of coaching standpoint, this is a great coaching matchup. I imagine Georgia really pissed off for greatness after that week of practice. So I'll take the Dogs at home fairly easily, but I think it's a rock fight for most of the game.